Elevating your moral and spiritual consciousness. The secrets to 12-step spiritual and moral recovery. I had to redo this. This is version 2 or second edition because a lot of my voice quality on some of the slides was pretty poor. So I revised it. I also added a bunch of new slides so it's a little bit more entertaining instead of a monologue. Has some good information. Hope you can get that and be lenient with the professionalism of this particular presentation. Again, let me thank you for allowing me to present this information to you. Your review of this material does me a great service by saving one starfish at a time. And just in case you don't know what I mean, there's a story about a woman walking along the beach, and every time she ran across a starfish, she threw it out to the ocean. Another man walking along the beach asked her, "What are you doing?" And she replied, "I'm saving a starfish." And with that, the man exclaimed, "Why, do you know how many starfish are washed up on this beach every day? What difference does it make by you throwing a few starfish back into the ocean?" She kneeled down, picked up a starfish, threw it out into the ocean, and replied, "It made a difference in that one." And believe me, carrying the message of 12-step recovery is just like saving starfish, one starfish at a time. You can attend a university or learn a trade, become a sports fan, or many other things where you can learn new things and expand your consciousness, often with many rewards for your efforts. Few know, however, the rewards of expanding your moral and spiritual consciousness. Hopefully this presentation can start you on your way. And to let you in on a secret, there are no secrets in 12-step recovery. Just like there wasn't any secret in the book called The Secret. Sure made a lot of money though. Anonymity does not equate with secrecy, and we are not letting the cat out of the bag if we present this information to people who are not in recovery. This moral and spiritual awakening process was passed on throughout the ages from one group to another. But change does occur, as well as atrophy. There may be no secrets, but some things do get forgotten. Back in the 80s, when I was attending 12-step meetings in DC, many of the meeting halls had a wall banner similar to the Steps and Tradition banners we now see. But this one was a list of credits and debits. It demonstrated how to conduct a moral inventory. Such a banner is no longer for sale, and anyone would be hard-pressed to find one. Change is inevitable. We live in a universe of constant change. The problem is, to overcome inertia, effort must be applied. If we are not progressing to improve our moral and spiritual character, then we will inevitably be stagnating or regressing. 12-step recovery is moral as well as spiritual. In order to progress morally and spiritually, and not to perfection, you will have to apply effort toward your goal, one day at a time. One day at a time takes on an entirely new meaning with long-term sobriety, or clean time. Since character development is progressive, but often slow, staying on the correct path requires awareness and diligence, one day at a time. How easy it might be hiking through the Sierras or driving through St. Louis and get lost. The 12 steps will have to be your moral and spiritual GPS navigation until someone improves upon the technology. In order to keep it, you have to give it away. Well, there are plenty to carry the message to recovery meetings, treatment centers, prisons, mental institutions, and so forth. There are many Christian churches that have Christian 12-step programs as well. I decided to carry the message to the high-caliber people who know how to read and read often. Following directions to achieve a goal is no problem. They know how to stick to a project until they reach their goal. They already have well-developed spiritual and moral character. Many are well-versed in various meditation techniques. These people are always improving their lives intellectually, morally, and spiritually. And these people can be found on LinkedIn. The blessed one then spoke as follows. If a soiled and dirty piece of cloth is dipped by the fuller in any dye, it will be of bad and dirty color. Why? Because the cloth is not clean. Even so, when the mind is impure, a bad future life must be expected. If a clean piece of cloth is dipped by the fuller into any dye at all, it will be of beautiful and clean color. Why? Because the cloth is clean. Even so, when the mind is clean, a good future life must be expected. Now, what are the impurities, the dirt and soil of the mind? Lust, greed, envy, anger, jealousy, hypocrisy, stubbornness, rebellion, arrogance, haughtiness, pride, deceit, malice, trickery, and the like are some of the many impurities of the mind. One who recognizes these impurities as undesirable will gradually abandon them on this plane of existence because of the pain and suffering these false idols bring. After one recognizes these things as impurities of the mind and abandons them, they will find serenity, joy, and enlightenment. This is called the parable of the piece of cloth, and I extracted it from the book What the Buddha Taught by Walpola Rahula. But isn't this behind all spirituality? Fact remains fact whether we like it or not. This message has been passed down through the ages, but to ever get it, but do we ever get it? It usually takes some pretty hard knocks, probably for many, many lifetimes, until we develop the willingness and tenacity to attempt removing these impurities of the mind. And just how do we accomplish such a thing? Fact, the list of impurities will guarantee a bad future, and the list of purities will guarantee a good future life. But how do we get from here to there? Nature abhors a vacuum. So we can't just remove these impurities from our mind without replacing them with something better or worse. And we must apply energy in order to overcome inertia and set the ball in motion. See how far you get on just $1.11 of gas in your tank. Fact, the list of impurities that are in your mind will grow on their own, but they won't magically migrate toward the light. And we all know this from life experience. Try not to think of the word elephant. The moment you hear this phrase, you automatically think elephant, elephant, elephant. In order not to think of the word elephant, you must replace it with another word, such as giraffe. Think giraffe, 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 and you will not have room to think of the word elephant. This holds true with any compulsive behavior. You can replace one compulsive behavior with another, often just as bad, such as quitting smoking or going to overeating, or quitting gambling only to become a shopaholic. However, sometimes the substitute behavior can be benign or beneficial. Developing a compulsive behavior to become a neuroscientist, to earn a PhD, become an attorney or a dentist is often necessary, but also very rewarding. The trick is changing gears from elephant to giraffe requires some energy to stop the motion of one and move out into a new direction. But once the compulsive engine kicks in, you are then on autopilot, with your only major concern of being aware of over-acceleration or friction. That credit debit list that used to be in 12-step recovery rooms is a system to conduct a moral inventory by using duality measurements. None of us are completely 100% honest or dishonest. We all fall in the line somewhere in between. What you will need to discover is, where do you fall in this line, so that you can gain some relative idea of how much honesty, the credit, and how much dishonesty you have. This will give you an idea of how far you need to travel and how much gas you will need to get there. And don't worry about becoming too honest. Becoming honest is like walking halfway to the wall and then halfway again and again. You will never reach the wall. What you want to discover is what range you can live in without causing too much destruction and pain. You will be experimenting and looking for your comfort zone. No one can go from 0 to 100% honest in 6 seconds, so you won't become honest by next Thursday either. If you discover that you are 50% honest and 50% dishonest, and it is not causing too many problems, you may not want to expend all your energy on this item. Maybe 51% honest might be okay as a temporary goal. There will be many more impurities on your moral inventory list that may require more immediate attention. This is a long distance run, one day at a time. You won't see immediate overnight changes with this method, but it works in the long term. Besides, where will you be in the next 5 years if you apply this method versus if you don't? A 5-year moral and spiritual advancement plan might be a good idea. This is what my moral inventory looked like the other day. Do you agree with me that I'm a work in progress? You see where arrogance and pride show up at 70%? That is mostly because I see everyone else as being arrogant and prideful. But if you spot it, you got it. And those are the people I have the most problems with. But if I don't get to work on this, there will be a lot more arrogant and prideful so-and-so showing up in my life by the delusional process of what you focus on, you create. Or at least that is all you see in this marvelous creation. It is like being blessed a million times over, but all you do is place your eyeball right on top of some imaginary but delusional and negative creation of your own. I have social problems, so my solution has been to become a recluse and write articles about this 12-step process. My writing skills far exceed my public speaking skills. So I exchanged my attending meetings and telling everyone how it works to a writing compulsion of writing about how it works. Much less damage so far. And sainthood? Well, you can forget about that for this lifetime at least. These impurities are like weeds in the garden. As soon as you get one section weeded out, new ones start to grow in another section. My moral inventories also vary greatly depending whether I am depressed, angry, elated, and so forth. But this is a very useful tool to use regularly, especially when you find that you are in a foul state of mind. These procedures are designed to restore you to sanity, which is otherwise called a healthy state of mind. Spiritual fact: improving your morality improves the quality of consequences you will face. Our society has values, but they're usually totally opposite of spiritual and moral values. Society values will always bring you debit, and spiritual values will bring you credit. And if that is all you needed to know, we would be ending this presentation. Fact: 12-step recovery is not simple. The slogan, "Keep it simple," is for simpletons. It is not simple to gain an education, become certified, and hold a professional position. The 12-step process is very complex and combines principles of spirituality, psychology, and morality. They didn't build the electron collider, the Large Hadron Collider, CERN, by keeping things simple. Just because our minds are so simple doesn't mean that the universe is. It is not just 12 steps. That is an outline created by Bill Wilson, conducted in a half an hour one evening in his bedroom, changing the process from 6 steps of short phrases to 12 steps with longer sentences summarizing each particular part of the process. He made it more complex in order to attempt to reach people who would not have the benefit of personal contact and tutoring from someone familiar with the process. If Bill had kept things simple, as he was often told by his friend Dr. Bob Smith, there wouldn't be an AA World Service or other 12-step organizations. Again, the 12 steps are not simple, nor do they work very well for simpletons. They are, however, a series of simple ideas built upon one another to create a quite complex process designed to elevate your moral and spiritual consciousness. There are many purposes and promised final states from the practicing of the 12-step process. One of them is the process will restore you to sanity. But this is not a clinical definition for sanity versus insanity, but only the emotional effect that the impurities of the mind have upon an individual compared to the effects on the mind that the purities produce. Learning and practicing this procedure will restore most relatively normal people from a seemingly hopeless state of mind to a healthy, spiritual, and morally awake state of mind, emotions, and behavior. We are not practicing clinical psychology, although some of the particular methods and techniques used in the process have their source from prominent psychiatrists and psychologists. The 12 steps are an outline of a complex process to achieve a spiritual awakening. The process is generally described in narrative form and is subject to ambiguous interpretation. The number 12 is used because of its Christian significance. Within each step are numerous sub-steps that often require extensive self-evaluation and acknowledgement work through the process of writing lists. The process requires skills in meditation and contemplation. A great deal of self-honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness are required to go through such a process. The applicant would also greatly benefit from a sound education in the processes of the subconscious mind and how the conscious mind can be affected through meditation or hypnosis. Depending upon the audience and how one might wish to present this information, it could be presented in 6 steps, to keep it simple, or it could be presented in 125 steps during a semester college course. Many words such as insanity, amends, humbly, fearless, and so forth would require extensive and distinct definition. The context of the writing must be understood from knowledge of the author and in his writing style as well. There are various self-inventory processes provided in the narrative of the instruction book that are not even alluded to in this above 12-step outline. To gain any significant results, one must have developed substantial academic skills and will need to apply them to comprehend and carry out the processes necessary to improve upon your own level of morality and spirituality. A man once sold his property to search the world over for diamonds. Upon his return, he learned that the largest diamond recently found was on the property he sold. Many search the world over for a spiritual path to follow, while the diamond is resting in their own backyard. The first 3 people who were able to find success in working this process to overcome their chronic alcoholism, that's beside Roland Hazard, was one, a former U.S. Army officer with a substantial university education with interests and experience in evaluating corporate organization and management styles to determine their realistic marketable worth. 2, a medical doctor who also spent a great deal of time studying and practicing spiritual remedies for chronic alcoholism. And 3, a prominent lawyer, city councilman, and active church member. These men were no slouches and had enough intellect to grasp on to the complexity of improving their moral and spiritual character through moral and spiritual development, and altruistic work of helping others with similar suffering people with the disease of chronic alcoholism. There were many distinguished and highly educated people involved in the development processes of the STEP, the book, and the organization. The above list only mentions a few. The 12-step process proved to be a miraculous healing method for those chronic alcoholics who have never been able to be helped before. This attracted psychiatrists, psychologists, medical professionals, clergy, and the like to observe and find out the workings of this process. Perhaps it could be applied in medicine elsewhere as a healing process. To summarize the history, Mr. Roland Hazard, a successful New York businessman from a wealthy Rhode Island family, had all the symptoms of advanced alcoholism. The latter stages of the disease require constant, compulsive ingestion of ethyl alcohol, which deteriorates the cells with many organs of the body. No matter how ill the person is from their consumption, they continue to drink until they either die or go insane. Intervention is usually only temporary. Roland had the wherewithal to go to Europe and seek the help from an eminent psychiatrist and psychologist, Dr. Carl Jung. Roland received a year's worth of treatment, only to return to New York City and drink alcoholically again. He returned to the respected doctor for more treatment and was told that he had the mind of a chronic alcoholic and that all hope was lost. Desperate, Roland asked if there was anything else available to him, and the good doctor replied that once in a while, an alcoholic recovers with a miraculous event often referred to as a religious experience. Perhaps if Roland were to join some religious organization and become immersed into their practices, he might be able to have such a miracle happen for himself. Roland did just that and joined the Oxford groups of the day, which coincidentally had an 8-step spiritual awakening process to be followed. It worked, and naturally, part of the process required altruistically helping others. Roland was able to persuade a judge, who was also a personal friend, to turn someone over to his organization who was about to be committed into an institution. Not a very nice places in those days and age, because of their chronic alcoholism. And that man was able to get sober through the process. This man, Ebby Thatcher, in turn, went to call upon a former friend and drinking companion to deliver this miracle-making information. That person was Bill Wilson, who, in the grips of chronic alcoholism, was the least bit interested in his friend's newfound religion. However, the seed was planted. Bill still had a wealthy brother-in-law who was able to get Bill back into the town's hospital. There, under the care of the hospital psychiatrist, Dr. William Silkworth, Bill was administered the belladonna treatment. Bill experienced a life and psychic changing event under the treatment, which completely altered Bill's personality and disposition. Upon Bill's explanation of the event, Dr. Silkworth verified that whatever took place appeared genuine, and Bill ought to do whatever he can to hang on to it. Bill joined the Oxford group and took to the streets trying to evangelize every drunk he encountered, much to the neglect of his own personal safety or that for his home and wife, dragging these unclean and uncouth drunks into his home to try to sober them up. After 6 months of continuous failure with his newfound method, Bill's wife, Lois, reminded him that he was still sober against all odds. Perhaps at that point he made the discovery that in order to stay sober, you must try to help others, and regardless of whatever may happen to them, you will remain immune. At that point, Dr. Silkworth also suggested to Bill that he might lay off the spiritual talk a bit and emphasize more what his alcoholic life was like, what happened, and what he is like now after using the step process. Perhaps the drunks he tried to save might relate to him better with a more honest and humble approach. With his newfound sobriety, Bill's ambition also returned. And in order to get himself out of the dire straits he created for himself and his wife, Bill sought out upon a business venture in Akron, Ohio, to take over a small business ripe for the picking. But after months of strenuous competition, he failed and, dismayed, returned to the hotel only to be tempted by the sound of the merry people from the hotel barroom. Desperate, Bill remembered that in order to stay sober, he must seek out another alcoholic to bring his message of sobriety. As the story goes, after vigorous effort of calling the ministry phone numbers listed on the hotel registrar in order to contact another alcoholic who might listen, he succeeded in setting up an appointment to talk to a physician who was identified having a severe case of alcoholism. His effort was sufficient to return to his bedroom to sleep rather than begin the nightmarish cycle of chronic alcoholism in the hotel barroom. His appointment was at the house of Henrietta Sieberling, a wealthy and helpful matriarch of Akron. She agreed that such a meeting between the New York recovered alcoholic and her friend Dr. Robert Smith might be beneficial to both parties. Dr. Smith, smug in his arrogance, said he would give the poor fellow 15 minutes of his time. But during the encounter, the New Yorker explained that he was not there to help the doctor with alcoholism, but he needed to talk to someone familiar with the symptoms of alcoholism by personal experience in order for himself to stay sober. These two Vermonters hit it off and talked for several hours. Dr. Bob, as many 12-steppers still call him, had one more episode with a bottle before he had sufficient drive and desire to apply the entire process that Bill had suggested to him. After that, they both set out to help others for their own benefit. They attended the Oxford Group spiritual meetings and tried to practice most of their moral and spiritual development principles in their life. When Bill thought that his period of sponsoring his new Ohioan friend was sufficient, he returned to New York City. Fanatic Clevelanders have bamboozled most 12-steppers to believe that AA was founded in Akron during Bill's visit. But all historical evidence points to New York City as the founding location of AA. Bill just carried the message to Akron. Dr. Bob went on to dedicate his life to altruistic service, helping thousands, one person at a time. Bill went on to 1. Start alcoholism recovery meetings in New York City that were no longer associated with the Oxford groups. 2. Open a central office. 3. Develop a foundation with a board. 4. Sell stock in his book profits to keep the office, foundation, and organization afloat. 5. Acquire public attention for his altruistic movement. 6. Develop the 12-step process. 7. Write a book on how to work these steps, providing actual stories of those who have successfully gone through the process. 8. Create a publishing company to produce and distribute the book. 9, create an organization to start a national alcoholism recovery meeting system to help alcoholics have a place to discuss the principles that the book sets forth. 10, establish rules for social conduct at these recovery meetings. 11, develop a system of assemblies to make his entire organization that has grown exponentially into a democratic society. 12, develop the corporate structure to serve and not rule the organization. And 13, set up standards for corporate administrative procedures for prudent, practical, and fair play. So I asked this guy, Roberto, who was sponsoring me when I was stationed in Panama, what do I get if I do all this stuff? He opened the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we read the eight promises on pages 83 and 84. And afterwards I said, oh, I pretended as if I understood what it meant, but I don't think I was fooling anyone. To someone with severe emotional and mental disorders, the words a new freedom and a new happiness mean very little. When you are not only addicted to a substance, but also addicted to all the miserable thinking, emotion, and behavioral patterns you developed over the years with very shady associates. And I have come to believe that most people coming into 12-step meetings suffer from severe emotional and mental disorders, although few would own up to it with any sincerity. And if you can't identify the problem, then how in the world are you going to know what needs to be fixed and what needs to be left alone? Some people would advise you to throw out the baby with the bathwater. They will persuade you that everything needs fixing, and they will make up new slogans so that you will think their off-the-hip advice has always been scripture and sacred. Slogans and cliches are very dangerous because, as good as they sound, they have nothing to do with how things actually function and can often leave you stranded on the rocks. So when I talked with Roberto in Panama, I was 30 years old. I didn't really begin to get this stuff until I was in my 60s. And that was only through diligent study and outside instruction after I was retired and I had time to do everything that was suggested several times in order to see any light. Psychology works for people with a normal psyche, but with the seriously disturbed, all bets are off. It is really a wonderful thing to never have to use again, but getting a moral and spiritual psychic change takes quite a lot more. On the other side of the equation, I know that these moral and spiritual words actually mean. But before I got to where I am now, I repeated these words with elegance, but with the knowledge of a parrot. So what if there were a 12-step machine, you plug it into the power source, and you pour your problems into one end, and out the other end comes resolution? Well, you can get that for just $1. That's what I did for 30 years. Go to 12-step meetings, pour in your problems, and go home with resolution. The drawback is that resolution only lasts about 24 hours, and you have to return for another dose. It's the methadone passive immunization method of recovery. It's not a bad system. It is a sound method that I've explained previously in this presentation, exchanging a negative compulsive behavior for a more positive one. Most people in 12-step programs don't require much more than that to stop their substance addiction. But that is not the 12-step machine I'm talking about. I'm referring to the 12-step program that is designed to solve all your problems. Some people get tired of living in the basement of recovery and desire better living quarters. We will be going from Band-Aids to medical science, and the training and skill level to operate this high-tech machine will require much more from you than going to a meeting to laugh, cry, fool around, meet your compadres, and so forth. To operate this 12-step machine, it will take extensive education, training, practice, skill, and ability. To operate the little drill held in the dentist's hands can take 7 or 8 years of training and internship before they can become certified to perform their acquired skills with that drill for the public. A good carpenter or farmer requires the same amount of education and experience to adequately conduct their trade. There is nothing simple anymore. A secretary, who may be one of the least paid of employees, requires and has obtained more technical skills than the dentist and most of her fellow employees. I use this story repeatedly to provide an example of why we need to read and follow directions if we want satisfactory results. One time I needed a dining room table, so I went to Target and found exactly what I needed. I thought they would sell me the assembled table, but they only brought to the cashier at the front of the store a box. I took the box home, opened it, and began to assemble it because I knew what I was doing, as that was my attitude with just about everything. 8 hours later, being a compulsive maniac who can't admit defeat, I was ready to call suicide prevention. Another time later in my life, I went to Target, because I knew nothing about shopping either, and bought another table. This time, I took it home, opened the box, breezed through the instructions, and got the same results. Another time when I was moving in with a girlfriend, and I always remember how that felt. It felt something like, Yahoo! Only much stronger than that. And we needed a dining room table. So I went to Target because I knew what I was doing. I took the box home, opened it, and looked at it and read the instructions several times. The entire concept still wasn't very clear. So I just did the first thing, which was to count all the parts and to make sure that they were all there. Not too difficult, so I went to the next step. I had to study the pictures closely to see which size bolts to use and which side the washers were supposed to be placed. I got so far and took a break. I went back and read the next set of directions and then proceeded to carry out that part, having to recheck the diagram once or twice to make sure I remembered it correctly. At one part, I assembled a part incorrectly, so I had to go back and redo that part. It still took me 8 hours, whereas someone who assembles tables routinely could probably do it in about 10 minutes. But the table came out great, and I was hoping that I would impress my girlfriend so that she would say, "My, what a good boyfriend you are." And that's my what a good boyfriend story I used to demonstrate why we shouldn't just breeze through the outline called the 12 steps and think we know what we're doing and how to do it. And my apologies to you who have been drugged through this story before. Nothing can be accomplished without desire. As I mentioned, it will take some time, a lot of time, to work through the 12 steps with the desire to remove the impurities from your mind that will cause a bad future life and replace them with the purities that will create an enjoyable and satisfying future life. So, there will be many other desires that will come up along the way that may seem more important than staying on this path to elevate your moral and spiritual consciousness. It might also be advantageous, before you start, to inventory how much you have and ask yourself if it will be enough to complete the task. Likewise, you may need to inventory how much open-mindedness, willingness, and honesty you have to complete the task. You have already been given the tools, duality inventory, to measure how much of the credit versus the debit you are starting out with. When your supply gets low, you may need to ask for more from your higher spiritual power. You will need instructions. You will probably need to read the instructions many times until the exact process is part of your memory. Starting out, you may need to review the instructions frequently, studying minute details to make sure you get them right. You may need to figure out some unfamiliar terminology, what it means in context of performing this task. And consulting someone who already knows how to do this process will be greatly beneficial. But you don't want to hook up with a charlatan or someone with misdirected motives. So your best bet is to hook up with someone who has been professionally trained in listening, counseling, mentoring, guiding, and psychology. As the saying goes, you get what you pay for. And you're going to need a power source to operate this 12-step machine. That is why it is called spiritual psychology. Instead of keeping the categories of spiritual and science separate, the author of the 12-step process preferred to incorporate various concepts into the working model, kind of like hedging your bets. Principles of morality, spirituality, and psychology are intermixed within the 12-step procedure, similar to what Bill Wilson previously learned, that it takes the combination of several concepts to be able to overcome chronic alcoholism. Knowledge of the disease is extremely important in recovery, but as with Rowland Hazard alone, it was insufficient. Dr. Robert Smith studied and practiced various spiritual methods in the attempt to overcome chronic alcoholism, but alone they were insufficient. Bill learned that altruistically carrying the message to others could keep him sober for a while, but later proved problematic. When all three were put together, they seemed to work synergistically and create a miraculous cure that could be repeated over and over. So, if you want to leave out one important ingredient, such as spirituality, out of this healing formula, don't expect complete success with your endeavor. Now, for this presentation, I am not talking about God or any other name found in many religions and spiritual centers of this planet. Actually, I'm talking more about a combination of philosophies about God from Carl Jung, Albert Einstein, David Bohm, Sir Arthur Eddington, Herbert Benson, Paul Buber, Paul Tillich, Saints Bernard, Catherine of Siena, Teresa of Avila, and other philosophers such as Spinoza, Hegel, Dante, Plotinus, and the like. But for convenience, I will start with the common term we use in this part of the English-speaking world, which is the word God. Now I have to repeat another story that I repeat often, which you may have heard many times. Please bear with me. A man was talking with a reverend and stated, "I don't believe in God." And the reverend responded, "Oh, tell me about this God you don't believe in." So the man went on for quite a while telling the reverend what he didn't like about his concept of God. When he finally finished, the reverend responded, "I don't believe in that God either." Most information provided for anyone looking for God is that He, an anthropomorphic entity, is everywhere and He is within. So the best I can do is first look throughout the world and the universe for God and look everywhere within my body for God. We already have a lot of data about both locations and no one has found God thus far. So I figure that the only place where God could exist, if He were everywhere and within, would be in my imagination. Imagination is a vast dimension, and we have the power to create good and bad within this infinity. That's probably too much power to be responsible for, but I wasn't part of the decision-making team when that happened, and I don't have all the details. But as with the story of two dogs, one negative and one positive, fighting within us, the one that wins is the one we feed. We are going to have to feed our imagination with good in order to remove the impurities and it may take quite a while until those impurities dilute out to insignificant quantities. In fact, I often use the word good rather than God to describe the power source I use to run my 12-step machine. And for the purposes of my writings and descriptions of the 12-step process, for me, my imagination is where my invisible, higher spiritual power resides. You may have heard of the experiment where 3 groups of people were brought into the gym to shoot basketball hoops, probably from the foul line. The first group was sent home and told to come back in 30 days. The second group was told to go home and practice at least an hour a day and then come back in 30 days. And the third group was told to go home and imagine shooting the ball and nothing else for a while, like an hour a day, and then come back in 30 days. And the statistics showed that naturally the first group made no change, but the other 2 groups both made significant changes in their shooting, whether they practiced or they just imagined. But what the experiment failed to provide was a group that did both practice and used their imagination. So I can't really tell you the level of degree that would improve, but I would think they would work synergistically, similar to what I'm explaining here, a spiritual concept along with physical application can really enhance your abilities, especially if you want to learn how to improve your moral and spiritual character so that you can have a good future life. So this God can be anything you want it to be. Now I'm talking to professional adults who already have formulated an effective model for their spiritual ideal. So there isn't much to this exercise except that it is an inventory to see what concepts of God you are holding in your psyche. And this exercise gives you the opportunity to review what's up there. Maybe you will discover some obvious contradictions or inconsistencies to your belief system. Now might be a good time to make any necessary changes. We often leave things up there in the old subconscious that were stored away when we were children, that were meant for children. We had no idea that our subconscious had been serving us with such inferior and inadequate information. Somehow, the subconscious doesn't keep up with the times, like our conscious mind does. But we all know that there are special psychological methods that must be applied if we want to transfer that current information from our conscious mind to our subconscious mind. And education and skill with meditation, hypnosis, prayer, and psychology are extremely important for successful results in learning how to operate the 12-step problem-solving machine. Now, this inventory of what you believe your God is and what God isn't is only a baseline measurement of your present beliefs. A personal 12-step program is always progressive, or otherwise sepsis sets in. To maintain any success in gaining your spiritual and moral goals, you will be required to continually, one day at a time, expand your concept of what you think your God is. Doing this exercise from time to time will provide you a measurement to determine your grade on the progressive scale. If maintenance is not performed, atrophy will naturally take over. So this is a different outline than what the 12-step outline is. But it's the same material arranged in a different pattern. If your mind is open, you will see the similarities and not the differences. If your mind is closed, then you're stuck living with the party line. For the purposes of this presentation, the above slide is an outline of the processes that one has to perform in order to remove those many impurities of the mind and replace them with moral and spiritual credits. Your life story is a key component. 12-step meetings in New York City started out mostly with one person telling their drinking autobiography, also known as a drunk log. From when they began drinking, the progression of the disease, and the regression of their morality and spirituality, when they reach the state of incomprehensible demoralization, also known as their bottom, and the turning point, then working through the process to recover morally and spiritually, and then finally what their life is like today. This pitch is very moving for the audience and the speaker. The speaker knows the story by heart because they lived every step along the way. But from where they are at in the present, it is very difficult to comprehend that they actually did those things and survived such experiences. And if they are genuine, the story is told with honesty, candidness, and great humility, and it is not expressed as a badge of courage or bragging. But that type of life story isn't what I'm talking about for these moral and spiritual awakening exercises. This life story exercise is the process of putting together the information about your life in an abbreviated and manageable form and performing various psychological reviews and methods to evaluate what your thinking, emotions, and behavior were like. Determine if some of the unwanted thinking, emotions, and behavior are still present in your life today, and then what changes would you like to make so that a good future life can be expected. So to start, you will need to make a list. You will be making many lists. This will be a list of names of the people you associated with for your entire life up until now. Wow, what a task. Well, in this case, keep it simple. Am I contradicting myself? Start with the ages 0 to 10 years old and put down no less than 10 names if you are mostly lazy, and no more than 20 names if you're mostly OCD. You can complete the task by just continuing to use 10-year increments, or you can go into further detail if you wish to evaluate different schools, jobs, locations, relationships, and so on. But to start, just make a list of names, and feel free to repeat names if they occur again later or in a location category again. An example would be a wife and then the same person as an ex-wife, or your parents when you were young and then in different age categories that come up later. So here's part of the technique you will be using to start to review each name on your list. You can go about this by approaching one name at a time and doing 3 sentences, or by writing the first sentence for each name on the list and then the second and then the third, or by doing one period or location category at a time, or whatever comes to mind. These techniques are designed to get you thinking in a certain pattern, and the precise way you go about it is not as important for this particular exercise. So with each name, there will be 3 actions you will need to take, which will be to write 3 sentences about each name. The first sentence will be, what was the story? This will be a summary of the entire experience as it resides in your mind. Keeping it to 1 sentence is difficult, but you have the academic skills to do this. Writing a novel mostly emphasizes heavy, emotionally laden memories that we may be trying to discard rather than enhance. So keep it short. Don't worry at this point if your sentence doesn't quite get it all. You can always go back later in your life and do more of this work to clean out those impurities. The second sentence will describe what was my thinking, emotions, and behavior at the time, as I remember it. Again, 1 sentence is difficult, but you are doing an exercise and not writing a novel. After much repetition of this exercise, you will start getting the point of this exercise. It is a process for finding and removing the impurities, so there is room for the moral and spiritual credits. The last sentence for each name will be, with what I know now, what would I have preferred my thinking, emotions, and behavior to have been? We can't change the past, but we can intelligently evaluate our past in order to make a better future. This is quite a project, and it's quite revealing. I am presenting this material as if I were writing to a psychologically healthy and mature audience, but please be careful not to wake up some nightmarish experiences of your forgotten and blocked out past, and if you do, please stop this work and seek the help of a compassionate and competent professional experienced in the field of psychology. Also, whatever concept of a compassionate and loving higher spiritual power you have developed earlier in these exercises will be needed for every step along the way. This may sound extreme, but eventually those who are progressing morally and spiritually also increase the frequency and improve the quality of their meditation and prayer practices. Spiritual and moral progress go hand in hand with regular and routine meditation and prayer. The qualities of having a spiritually and morally awake state of mind are very much contrary to the world's values as we know it, when we were spiritually and morally asleep. So don't worry if you think you don't have the time for all of this. If you seek spiritual and moral progress first, time will expand to allow you to do everything else your heart desires. You know, seek first the kingdom of God and everything else shall be provided to you. There may be just some truth to that. Once you have completed this project, the next phase will be to look for similar thinking, emotions, and behavior experiences with different people. Look for repetitious patterns of thinking, emotions, and behavior with a person of your childhood and see where it pops up again and then perhaps later. This exercise is to reveal a particular psychological theory. We recreate, to a certain degree, our childhood relationships with our associates in the present. For whatever reason, we are attracted or repulsed by someone in our present life. It may just be our thinking, emotions, and behavior about someone in our past, tucked neatly inside our subconscious so that we relive the experience, good or bad, once again. Once you start spotting some of these past thinking, emotion, and behavior habits popping up in your activities, you can begin making changes to your present thinking, emotion, and behavior. It will be difficult because all of these subconscious activity is working in nanoseconds, while our conscious mind is overloaded with all sorts of other activity and often operating on a delayed response mode. You probably won't do too well with this, but practice and tenacity will raise the curve of success. And preliminary work with a hypnotherapist can help out in advance by helping you discover which people in your present life are the facades of people, places, and things from your past. Knowing that you're interacting with your boss the same way you did with your father can help accelerate your thinking, emotion, and behavioral awareness in the present. Put a stop to it and go into the thinking, emotion, and behavior you prefer. First of all, you will need power, lots of energy, to stop the inertia of this established pattern. So give your imaginary higher spiritual power all the power of the universe so that it can easily overwhelm any power the established pattern may hold. Use this power to stop yourself from reacting to your habitual thinking, emotion, and behavior with this person, place, or thing. A great deal of prerequisite education and practice with meditation and methods of calming yourself are required to apply this corrective action well. Those who have practiced meditation or self-hypnosis for some time are familiar with the altered state of mind and can enter that state immediately at will. They can also keep an alert, functioning state of mind to deal with whatever task they are performing at the time, with enhanced skill, care, and caution. Kind of like those people who can shoot a great game of billiards while they are in an alcoholic blackout. This procedure requires calming part of yourself to that state of mind in order to contact your higher spiritual power and gain the necessary energy to stop the motion of the old thinking, emotions, and behavior and changing direction into a new and improved thinking, emotion, and behavior while not looking weird to everyone around you or running your car off the road. And it all has to be performed in a nanosecond. Baseball players can react in nanoseconds. Professional dancers do too. Your higher spiritual power must give you this ability as well. But it has to be genuine and not a performance, or you will not gain the joy and release provided by love and the understanding that not too many people on this planet are morally or spiritually awake. Perhaps your new thinking, emotions, and behavior can carry that message to them in an unspoken way. At the end of each day, keep a record of your successes and failures. Discuss your unsatisfactory thinking, emotions, and behavior with someone you trust, and gain new insights on how to improve upon some of these routine events in your life. In meditation, talk with your higher spiritual power. Ask for the removal of the debits and replacement with the credits. Regroup and replan for some of those more arduous personalities and tasks that you may encounter the next day. Give thanks for all the improvements you now have succeeded with. We are now going to start a more in-depth house cleaning so that those credits have no more impurities to hinder their growing and multiplying. There is no limit to the joy you can experience in your future life, whether it is here on this planet or elsewhere. The experience of moral and spiritual health is much greater than the experience that any new house, new car, new job, or new relationship can provide. Now that you're starting to feel pretty confident with the improvements that you are making to your thinking, emotions, and behavior from these preliminary exercises, go back to your list. Make sure to bring your higher spiritual power along. Review each name and experience from the earliest to the more recent and identify at that time where you may have been powerless over the events. Look for the places where you were motivated by your thinking, emotions, and behavior to take some sort of corrective action and ask yourself, how did that work? In some events, you may have managed or behaved poorly and still have lingering thinking, emotions, and behavior impurities. Some events may have been so unhealthy that your reaction to it may be in the insane category. No matter how hard this is to look at, you are now aware that you can no longer allow these impurities to create more hardship and misery into your future life. And you are developing successful methods to do something about it. Whenever you feel powerless, that you are not managing well, and perhaps your thinking and emotions and behavior is a bit insane or unhealthy, stop. Go into your meditative state of mind and ask your higher spiritual power to provide you the sanity and the power to manage well. The point of the previous exercise was for you to be more open to the concept that in many schools of theory, both spiritual and psychological, self-sufficiency, self-reliance, self-centeredness, selfishness, and the bogeyman himself, ego, seem to be more of a liability than an attribute. These traits, such as pride, ambition, and so on, that we once learned as having value, are now being seen from another perspective, which is that they are the cause of our troubles and a troubled thinking, emotion, and behavioral system. The churches and religions are no longer reaching a sufficient amount of our population with early moral education because their dogma, myths, and fairy tales are no longer relevant to this day and age. Our population is not getting a moral and spiritual education from adult school, television, or the movies. So the moral standards of the past, such as restricting movies, television, video games, and even our libraries to keep infectious, amoral material out of our young, impressionable minds are no longer deemed necessary or important. So don't worry about your present moral standards. Everyone has to start somewhere. You didn't do anything wrong if this philosophy of improving your moral and spiritual standards to drastically improve the quality of your life seems correct, but you're a bit disappointed that you are only finding this out now. So by now, you have a good idea of what I mean when I'm talking about a moral inventory. This procedure has faded away from nearly all 12-step recovery programs because Bill Wilson didn't describe it in his book. Or most likely, the description of the procedure was edited out of the book. In fact, when Bill first wrote his book, over 400 pages were edited out for the sake of making the book Alcoholics Anonymous marketable. And because of the democratic structure of 12-step organizations and the strong reluctance by membership to make any change in their basic literature, there won't be any upgrades to the 1930s narrative instructions on how to actually make a significant improvement to your moral and spiritual character with the 12 steps. There are various personal inventories in the book: resentments, fear, sex, described in the written instructions of Alcoholics Anonymous. But this omitted type of moral inventory is still an excellent method to discover what is bugging you or to measure your moral and spiritual progress. There are many words that are in 12-step or other spiritual literature that can be used for moral duality measurement. To do this type of moral inventory, find 10 words that reflect desirable moral personality traits and list them under the credit side. Then list on the opposing debit list what you believe to be the opposite. List 10 more words that reflect debit character traits, and then under the credit column, put down the thinking, emotion, and behavioral goal that you would like to achieve. Now, if you already have high percentages on a credit side, move that trait over to the debit side, and then list what you think you would be an improved quality of that trait on the credit side. Doing this procedure routinely, say once a month or semi-annually, is very beneficial for your moral and spiritual maintenance and progress. Champions do not rest on their laurels. You can't work on everything at once, but those debits with the highest percentage values may be just what is causing some of your thinking, emotion, and behavioral problems. Pick one or two and frequently ask for help with these in your meditation and prayers with your higher spiritual power. Try to become more aware whenever you are in those negative thinking, emotion, behavioral states of mind, and follow the procedure that you are now familiar with, which is calming your mind, asking your higher spiritual power to accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative. Most of the basic list making, self-evaluations, inventories, and so forth are for your eyes only. Please be very careful with your material and with what you wish to share with anyone else, no matter how trusted they may be. In trying to let others know of your good intentions, things don't always function in the way that they were planned. We all judge others, and there will be very few who will not only have your best interest in mind, but will also have sage experience and advice to point you in the correct direction. There are many false prophets out there who will ultimately let you down. What is good advice for one person may fail utterly for another. It is your responsibility to protect yourself. Just because you are changing doesn't mean that the world or our society has changed. Your initial breakthroughs and insights will change perspective with time. People may not comprehend what to you seems to be revelation. These new discoveries create new and sometimes overwhelming emotions, but don't let them override your intellect and behavior. Do not impulsively act upon these new feelings and ideas and quit the day job. Consult with wise and experienced people who have gone through the same things or who have been adequately trained in counseling you before taking any action. The consequences of such impulsive actions are often severe and can be quite difficult to survive. You should thoroughly review and edit much of the written material of your discoveries before discussing these issues with a mentor, sponsor, or counselor. You should be able to discern what thinking, emotions, and behavior from your past are appropriate for discussion and which subjects should be left alone. Again, I'm addressing an audience that has intellect, experience, and an education to know better than to naively expose themselves to the quick judgments and prejudices of others, no matter how much all for one and one for all jargon is tossed around. Many professionals have legal requirements to report certain thinking, emotions, and behavior to other agencies, despite their intentions to help you, and not all professionals are credible or competent in performance of their jobs. We are all hypocrites to one degree or another. Do not set yourself up to be betrayed or hurt. Many people who approach you offering help are doing so to enlarge their own ego at your expense. Many are inexperienced but extremely zealous with their own limited discoveries. Do not allow yourself to be manipulated by guilt, shame, remorse, or lament. These items are on the debit side of the list of impurities, which will need to be discarded and replaced as soon as possible. Stick with the mechanics of the spiritual and moral awakening process and don't take on any Herculean challenges. You will have plenty to do with just making the thinking, emotion, behavioral changes within yourself without having to move to a new location, change jobs, start a new career, and so forth. Stick with the basics and wait till later to start the postgraduate work. And don't accuse yourself or others for being a hypocrite. This is a very harsh term for an innocent characteristic we all have. We are all in various states of progression or regression for one reason or another. Focusing on the negative will only bring you more negative. Remember, if you spot it, you got it. Thank those who point out the areas that you need to work on. The 12-step methodology about making amends is often enough to frighten anyone from ever having the desire to do this. The stories are about Herculean tasks conducted in the middle of Antarctica, paying back millions of dollars while working at a 7-Eleven. I don't think that I could quite ever measure up to such superhuman displays of fortitude and strength as relayed to me by such famous and charismatic circuit speakers. Even though I was quite entertained for an hour, I usually trip over my feet right outside the door. So this presentation has spent a great deal of time on one particular method of self-inventory and has provided you several methods of how to use this method to take corrective action with your less than desirable thinking, emotions, and behavior. The corrective action and the final result of no longer entertaining the negative thinking, emotion, and behavior about whatever person, place, or situation was causing you problems is the amend. You now know how to put the thinking, emotion, behavioral problem into one end of the 12-step machine, and out of the other end comes the completed amend. You know which switches to turn on and which dials to turn off, and which dials to adjust, getting the power source hookup, and so forth. We all know that our subconscious mind has the responsibility for most of our body's activities, probably all the way down to the subcellular level. The above diagram, crediting our conscious mind for 10% of the mind's activity, is being very generous. I would think the difference would be more on a logarithmic scale than percentage, but we all like the iceberg metaphor. Now, some people have tremendous willpower and have accomplished remarkable things. But as with the earlier life review exercises in this presentation, many of us have discovered that we often come up short when we relied on willpower alone. Since the predominance of the subconscious over the conscious is a physiological fact, my guess would be that those who demonstrate great willpower know something about programming their subconscious mind in order to serve their needs. But somehow I don't think David Blaine is going to reveal his secrets to the academic community. One method of reprogramming your subconscious mind is hypnotherapy. Hypnotherapy. I am not a neuroscientist, so I only know the same information that you already have, which is that the electroencephalogram brainwave measurements in both hypnosis and meditation are relatively the lower frequency delta and theta waves. The only difference that I have been exposed to in this particular usage of the same trance-like state, where hypnosis is used to contact the subconscious mind, and meditation is used to contact the superconscious mind. But for us laymen who can't fine-tune a particular wavelength channel or stop our heart and breathing at will, we will just have to settle for whatever trance-like state of mind we achieve by following a certain induction method of meditation or self-hypnosis. But this trance-like state of mind that we achieve is sufficient and can be used with remarkable results in the amends-making process. Thus far, I've already provided you the method. Read up on various methods of meditation and self-hypnosis and practice frequently so that you become skilled at entering this trance-like state with part of your mind and can contact your higher spiritual power while still maintaining a normal and alert bodily and conscious mind mental functioning. We already know that our brain can do many things at the same time. Become attuned, this is two, become attuned to your thinking, emotions, and behavior, which is also mindfulness. And whenever it is not optimally performing in the happy, joyous, free mode, which is spiritually awake and morally awake, take corrective action by entering the meditative channel with one part of your mind, contact your superhuman, supernatural power, and ask it to make the appropriate changes to your thinking, emotions, and behavior instantly by eliminating the negative and accentuating the positive. Now, how many steps was that? So the information I'm providing is only at the level of self-hypnosis for dummies. But there are many dummies in 12-step programs who don't know very much about meditation, yet alone self-hypnosis, which is usually a taboo subject for discussion. 12-step meetings are usually filled with a lot of ballast to make sure that not too many ethereal topics are brought into the rooms that might upset their God, who is usually sitting in an empty chair purposefully left in the center of the room. There is also a lot of contradiction in the 12-step written narrative, which allows for frequent change of direction and counterpunching during the discussion. It can be quite fun and funny. Great entertainment for a buck, but sometimes the quality of material you are learning can equate to watching sitcoms for an evening. Contradiction is a natural occurrence when writing. During one particular section, you are trying to make a certain point, and later, when making a different point, you contradict some things you stated previously. My first experience with this was as an industrial hygiene inspector during my service in the United States Air Force. One part of the occupational safety regulation for charging lead-acid batteries was to always leave the caps on during charging so that the acid mist does not get into anyone's eyes. Yet another part of the same passage required that the caps should be removed when charging so that the batteries do not explode. So which is it? The A book was written by Bill Wilson, who was about 3 years sober, never written a book previously, and didn't have too much specialized education in authoring books. So such contradiction is inevitable and also trivial, unless you take that one major step, which is changing the authorship of the book from a human entity to a deity. Then we can learn the passages in the book so that we can become the voice for God. We didn't like the way things were run when we were peons in the churches we grew up in. But once given a little authority, we go straight back to the nonsense we learned. But I digress into some unresolved resentments. So back to the subject at hand. A professional and certified hypnotherapist can be very useful with your 12-step work. We may have tried with our self-applied techniques to overcome our resentment, but somehow it still remains. Maybe not as harsh, but still raising its ugly head during our weak moments. I believe it has something to do with part physician heal thyself and part whenever two or more are gathered. In the workshop that I can provide you, posted on YouTube and LinkedIn, entitled 12-Step Recovery Procedures, Volume 1, The Procedure for Spiritual Awakening, I provide you more information to the process. But my material is still very elementary, and you probably know a great deal more than myself about this subject and the wonderful results hypnotherapy can provide. I am presently reading books from Brian Weiss and Greg Unterberger and the like, in which many of these new and innovative hypnosis techniques could possibly be applied in conjunction with 12-step work. Emotional freedom technique has helped me considerably with anger management techniques. I wouldn't recommend closing the door to any of these methods without first doing a little investigation and trial. The original 12-step literature, AA 1.0, quite possibly may never be corrected, expanded, enhanced, or upgraded. The instructions for the 12 steps, or the original instructions, in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, have three types of inventory. There's an inventory for resentments, another inventory for fear, and lastly, there's a sex inventory, in which the latter has more to do with guilt and shame and other undesirable thinking, emotions, and behavior we have acquired about this subject over a lifetime. Bill Wilson had a great deal of trouble, as well as I, with this bugaboo. This first form of self-inventory can be fun and also create some eye-opening revelations. Some people don't have resentments. For those of you who don't, you won't have to do this exercise for resentments. Instead, just write down the names of all the people who annoy you, and this exercise will work just the same for those fellows as well. This is the same exercise as the life review, only now we go back to all those names, places, and institutions that are still sticking in our craw. There is some more work that needs to be done to clean out those darn impurities stuck in our subconscious mind. Get out your list of names, but instead of one sentence for the story, use one sentence to describe the crime they committed against you. In all seriousness, some of these things were criminal, harsh, and unfair. But again, I'm talking to an audience who has worked many of these things out already and knows that hanging on to our indignation will only create more misery and is not the solution. Think of the life Nicole Simpson's father created for himself after her murder. Poor man is still probably furiously in pain. Use another sentence then to describe the damages that were caused to yourself by their crime. For each one, take your case to your higher spiritual power. So I don't need to tell you that no matter what the crime or atrocity, the only spiritual solution will be a verdict of not guilty and total forgiveness. But we aren't quite there yet. So go back to your list and cross out the names that you can or already have forgiven and put down your name. Looking at this situation from a completely different angle, see where you have committed some degree of these same crimes with others. Think of the damage that may have occurred. Take this case to your higher spiritual power and receive the same verdict. We really don't know what we do. Now, for the ones on our list where we just can't quite get the forgiveness, we will need to apply more positive energy to the object to overcome its inertia. Start looking for similar thinking, emotion, behavior responses with other people formerly in your life. Some of my revelations were, 1, I hated this guy at work because he was always able to get to the boss's office with his story first, which was very similar to my tattletale sister who always got to my parents first. 2, a guy who let me down as a 12-step sponsor created the same result that I experienced with my father growing up. 3, I married someone who all of a sudden developed all the personality traits of my crazy mother. 4, my older sister bullied me a lot, and so did the secretarial pool at work. And 5, I always wanted to save my younger sister from our horrible family, and I just so happened to hook up with a few of my younger sister's surrogates along the way, so I could rescue them and then become their warden. So this is what must be done if you wish to remove the impurities and expect a future good life. In a deep meditation, now don't be driving or operating heavy equipment with this kind of meditation. Review each name and with your higher spiritual power, ask for yourself and the party that you still have the thinking, emotion, and behavioral problems with for 1, sanity, which is healthy thinking, emotions, and behavior. 2, avoidance of all negative, unhealthy thinking, emotions, and behavior, to include things such as anger, argument, and retaliation. 3, ask for a genuine change of heart, forgiveness, peace, calm, and empathy. And these are healthy thinking, emotions, and behavior. Now remember to do this for yourself and the other party as well. And then 4, ask for an elevated moral and spiritual consciousness. Come out of the meditation at a more elevated moral and spiritual consciousness than when you went in. Repeat the procedure as needed. With persistence, at some point you will reach a critical mass, and all of these unhealthy thinking, emotions, and behaviors will collapse, and you will experience heaven on earth. The AA instructions also provide a method for a fear inventory. I put this off when I was younger, probably because of fear, but also because of machismo. Very 2 misunderstood and understood debit traits that should be classified with stealing. When I finally wrote a practical list of the things I thought I was afraid of, they turned out to be very ridiculous and contradictory things that inside my psyche had way too much power over my thinking, emotions, and behavior. So you know the drill. Follow the above directions and you will be amazed before you are halfway through. And I saved the worst for last, and I'm not playing with words. This may be one of the hardest areas to conquer in our lifetime because of the screwed up thinking, emotions, and behavior are connected with ecstasy-producing hormones and bodily chemicals that affect us like drugs. My suggestion would be to wait till you're about 65 or 70 to start on this inventory project. That is, unless you can't stand yourself any longer and you're ready to jump out a window because of it. In that case, first seek the help of an empathetic professional in the field of psychology. Don't start this inventory work without help and supervision. But if you're afraid that if you seek help, you will be labeled with a sociopathic psychological disorder, that is a significant fear to respect. There are few 12-step groups for this issue, and there isn't a lot of sage advice in some of those meetings. At this point, I'm not joking. There is a very large percentage of our society that have some very severe issues with this case of our lives, with this area of our lives. They pretend to be normal and are quite good at it, myself included, that cannot talk about this other personality with anyone lest they be labeled a sexual pervert or deviant. So if you can really seek out help, or if you can't really seek out help because of the high risk, then start this project. But be careful. Take it from someone who has been there. You have been surviving this addiction cycle through some of the worst, insane thinking, emotion, and behavioral patterns imaginable. I can't claim that any of these procedures will ever remove what has been so firmly placed into your psyche, but you can expand the addiction cycle to livable conditions and greatly reduce the negative thinking, emotions, and behavior at the low end of the cycle. With these procedures over a period of time, you can also reduce the extreme addictive sexual thinking, emotions, and behavior back down to something within reason by substituting lesser and lesser consequential and more socially acceptable thinking, emotions, and behavior. Well, at least there's hope. If you need more detail, I published my sexual inventory in the chapters of my book, A Few Good Men and Women, 12-Step Spiritual Moral Recovery for U.S. Military Active Duty Dependents, Retired, and Veterans. If you're interested in this material, contact me on LinkedIn, and I will send you a manuscript to your email if you want to review it. I'm 65 and I've made some progress, so I can take the risk if this so much as helps just one of you out there. You will have to trust that I will keep all email and address and name information confidential. Or you can just buy the book on Amazon or CreateSpace store, since this is a professional audience that can afford to buy a book. Oh, and I have a PS here, because I did forget to mention that there are medications available from the professional psychological help field, which help reduce sex drive, sexual fantasy, and reduce the orgasm experience, which is contrary to most of this, what is presented to us commercially. But to get these, it requires a minimum disclosure to the prescribing medical professional. I personally have found it to be very beneficial for my addiction to sexual fantasy and orgasm. I have also provided a free PowerPoint workshop on YouTube and the written dialogue on LinkedIn for anyone interested in working through these exercises in greater detail. The books and DVDs are also available on CreateSpace Store. Some of the following slides now will give you that link information to save me the trouble of trying to verbalize a link. These are the free links to get this information that I'm presenting now, and the workshop for this information, where you can spend more time stopping slides, writing your lists, evaluating it, and doing it step by step, and coming up with the revelations that are intended by the exercises. There's one error here that I have an older version of this same presentation, and there weren't enough slides, and the speaking voice kind of failed along the way. But anyway, some more slides with some more links coming up. This slide identifies some of the other volumes that I created. One for working with a mentor or working with a sponsor for your 12-steppers. And one's written and one's YouTube. They're kind of limited. And there's another one for start your own support group. Now, this is more fantasy than reality. Each time I write this, it comes out different. This one is some kind of a hypothetical organization where people get together just for the purpose of using the 12 steps to develop their moral and spiritual character. It's way out, but it has all the principles that Bill Wilson developed. And then I spin them my way, one way or another. I also provide a free book, Character Development, on the site below. And you can always buy this stuff on CreateSpace or Amazon. And there's a fourth volume I haven't put together. because it gets really in depth, and most people aren't interested in it. But if you are, I can provide you that information, or it is in some of my other books, such as the Bill Wilson Paradigm, a blueprint for the next generation. That's very detailed on a lot of what Bill Wilson created and some of the philosophy and ideology behind it. So by working these procedures I've presented, or by using the free online workshops and written narratives I have on LinkedIn and YouTube, you already have made numerous amends, and you know they are harmless and nothing to be afraid of. They are not the scary boogeymen that many macho loudmouths and 12 steps programs would lead you to believe they are. Amends are spiritual and not physical, but people without spiritual knowledge would not be able to discern that. However, the AA text does provide some direction on how to determine if someone is spiritually awakened. It says, when a man or a woman has had a spiritual awakening, the most important meaning of it is that he or she has now become able to do, feel, and believe that which he or she could not do before on unaided strength and resources alone. He or she has been granted a gift which amounts to a new state of consciousness and being. They have been set on a path which tells them they are really going somewhere, that life is not a dead end, not something to be endured or mastered. In a very real sense, they have been transformed because they have laid hold of a source of strength which in one way or another they have previously denied themselves. They find themselves in a possession of a degree of honesty, tolerance, unselfishness, peace of mind, and love of which they had thought themselves quite incapable. End of quote. But these are the road signs you might want to follow to look to determine whether someone is genuine or faking. Beware of the many false prophets. They are only filled with their ego. They may lead you down the wrong road. They only thought they lost their egoism. From my personal experience, I see a bright aura in my peripheral vision that intuitively tells me this person is enlightened and what they have to say requires my attention. Their eyes shine and they have a profound peace of mind. Someone spiritually enlightened does not demand anything from you or sell you guilt tickets. Their method of teaching is through praise and not critique. Because spiritual principles are paradoxical to this world, their methods may not make sense to our egos. This is another quote from Bill Wilson. This indeed is the kind of giving that demands nothing. The enlightened one does not expect his brother to pay him, love him, or even obey him. And then he discovers that by divine paradox of this kind of giving, he has found his own reward. He senses that he stands at the edge of new mysteries, joys, and experience, of which he had never dreamed. And the other quote I want to use to end this is also from Bill Wilson in his book. Still you may say, but I will not have the benefit of contact with you who write this book. We cannot be sure. Your higher spiritual power will determine that. So you must remember that your real reliance is always upon your higher spiritual power. Your higher spiritual power will show you how to create the fellowship you crave. So this slide is about Volume 2 of the 12-Step Recovery Procedures. Start your own support group or your own moral and spiritual support group. It's for people that aren't into addiction or don't need it for addiction, but still desire to grow morally and spiritually. I wrote it rather conservatively with a lot of rules, basically to rule out a lot of clowning around and nonsense that's allowed in other meetings, and to take this more on a serious note. Information's available if you're interested. Okay, and then these are pictures of what the book and the DVD would look like for Volume 3, which is working the process with a mentor. And also provided are the free links on LinkedIn and YouTube. Okay, and then this is a slide showing the various books that I've put together. Same subject, sometimes very intense and detailed, and sometimes trying to make it simple. Addressed to different audiences. It's my passion. Some of it's difficult to read. I think it all has really good sound information in it. And it all comes basically from Bill Wilson and his life work. So if you're interested in any of this, have at it. You can get most of it on Amazon or CreateSpace Store. And again, anyone that needs this information can't afford it, I'll gladly provide you the manuscript. Just contact me on LinkedIn. Thank you very much for letting me present this to you. I thank you for your patience and tolerance. Obviously, my speaking voice is not professional quality, but I like to get this information out to as many people as I can. There's only a small percentage that will really need it or review it, but those are the starfish I'm trying to reach. Thank you.